Israeli forces massacre 16 Palestinians in an attack on a UN-run school as the Gaza death toll spikes to over 790. Breaking the siege, Palestinian resistance groups launch hundreds of rockets against major Israeli cities. And Iraq's parliament elects Kurdish politician Fuad Massoum as the country's new president following months of political deadlock. Hello there, you're watching Gali Tijah World News and I'm Fatima Basim. It's another day in yet another Israeli perpetrated massacre in the Gaza Strip. At least 16 people have been killed, including a baby, and 150 others injured after Israeli tanks shelled a UN-run school in northern Gaza. The school hit was being used by the UN's Palestinian refugee agency UNRWA as a shelter by hundreds of Gazans fleeing the Israeli onslaught in the area. The death toll is expected to climb as more bodies and wounded arrive at nearby hospitals.
The patients came in large numbers from Beit Hanun via ambulances from the school that was targeted to Kamal Adwan Hospital. We received dozens of cases, among them at least 6 dead.
They struck the UN school. We have nowhere to go except the UN school. They fired rockets at us while we were there. The Red Cross came to get us. They are killing us. Where shall we go?
The Secretary General said that he is appalled by the news of an attack on a UN Relief and Works Agency school in northern Gaza, where hundreds of people had taken refuge. Many have been killed, including women and children, as well as UN staff. He once again says all sides must abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law to respect the sanctity of civilian life, the inviolability of UN premises, and to honor their obligations to humanitarian workers. Today's attack underscores the imperative for the killing to stop, and to stop now.
Well, the lack of security is not the only problem Gaza's residents face. The coastal strip is lacking in just about everything else. Bassem Al-Atrash gives us a look now into the lives of Palestinians who have taken refuge in some of those UN schools across the enclave.
The 18th day Israeli offensive is changing the landscape in the Gaza Strip. Schools are just some of the buildings being turned into refugee camps as thousands of desperate Palestinians flee the Israeli onslaught.
From the bombing and shelling, we left our homes running away until we reached here at these schools.
Most of these people came from Gaza's border areas. Their new homes are overcrowded UN schools, where thousands of women, children, and the elderly endure the harsh living conditions. And it's not just security that's lacking in Gaza. The facilities here lack water, power, and food supplies. There's no milk to feed babies, and even mattresses and blankets are in short supply.
We are sitting on the sand. We are suffering. No water, no electricity. Even food isn't enough. We don't have money to buy anything. Our children are ill, and no medicine is available.
We eat only once a day. Each classroom has 100 people in it. We sit on the sand, no mattress.
But there is little sympathy for these people among Israeli forces who have targeted a UN school turned into a shelter, killing at least 15 and injuring over 150 other. The Israelis have targeted 3 other schools used as shelters in the past 2 weeks, leaving behind wounded. According to the UN, around 103,000 Palestinians are residing in UN facilities, lacking basic supplies. The 8-year Israeli blockade and siege imposed on the Gaza Strip has made it even more difficult to provide supplies and services for the refugees, even before this latest offensive.
We try to make many activities about send for message most of the time about in the people, work with the another organization in the international organization, talk with about in the all the committee, make yani lobbying about with the another lawyer in the all the world, NGOs, international NGOs, all of them talk and ask him to support in the Palestinian people.
Those calls have fallen on deaf ears, however. And while the coastal strip slips towards a humanitarian disaster, the silence of the international community is deafening for most Gazans. The bitter reality of the Palestinians in Gaza is that they are alone, beleaguered, under siege, displaced, and exposed to a barbaric assault by Zionist forces. Along with that, shameful international silence. Balsam Al-Atrash, Tijah TV, from in front of UN School here in Gaza.
Let's get the latest with Balsam, who is standing by for us in Gaza. Balsam, tell us about the ongoing Israeli attacks on Khan Yunis and elsewhere in the besieged strip.
Yes, the Israeli occupation forces are continuing with their assaults and attacks on people here in the Gaza Strip. In Khan Yunis area, in particular in Khuza'a and the Garara area, these areas lie on the eastern border of Gaza Strip, are still under heavy shelling and bombing from the Israeli artillery and tanks since 48 hours now, or for 48 hours now. Palestinians in that area have been banned from even reaching out for the outside world, and even for medical teams and paramedics to respond to their calls and evacuate them from that area. Eyewitnesses in that area actually said that the Israeli troops had shot them in their feet and legs as they were running away from the Israeli shelling and bombing this morning. Also, around 117 have been killed in that area, raising today's death toll to today's death toll had just hit 800, and over 5,500 Palestinians have been killed. Khuza'a area is still under a great or massive massacre till now, and meanwhile, as we speak, the Israeli troops on the border are still shelling the homes and bombing the residential buildings in the area. According to the medical teams and the Red Cross Committee, they said that they tried to coordinate with the Israeli side in order for them to allow them to enter the area and evacuate some of the victims. After efforts, the Israeli side responded, but only allowed them to enter some areas, not all of them, since they said that the other areas had, as they claim, Hamas resistance groups fighter, and that they didn't want them to escape the area through the ambulances and the medical team's vehicles. Also, medical team vehicles that had entered Khuza'a area were inspected as they left and made sure that they did not contain anything or any resistance groups members or fighters. Also, the medical teams and doctors were arrested as they were trying to enter the area in order to evacuate the patients. According to eyewitnesses, after we contacted some of them, they said that 5 members of the medical teams and paramedics have been arrested, along with another 150 residents from the area being removed from their homes and taken by the Israeli troops inside or behind the enemy line and still imprisoned by the Israeli troops. This is the situation in Khuza'a. Moving towards the north, just about half an hour ago, 3 houses were destroyed in Nasser area in the central city of Gaza Strip. Also, eastern Gaza Strip, Shijaiya, and northern areas, northeastern areas such as Zaytun and Beit Hanun are still witnessing gunfire and clashes between Palestinian resistance groups and Israeli troops. Also, they are witnessing air raids and airstrikes by the Israeli occupation warplanes, in addition to tank bombing and shelling from the Israeli artillery and tanks. Also, in the area of central Gaza Strip, the area of Deir el-Balah and al-Maghazi refugee camp are witnessing a similar situation as the Palestinian resistance groups continue to engage in gunfire and clashes with the Israeli troops on the border.
Yes, and we know that a lot of people are still stuck under the rubble of Israeli attacks. Have medical workers been successful in pulling out these victims?
Medical workers, in order for them to enter such areas, need to coordinate through so-called international organizations or humanitarian organizations, such as the Red Cross Committee. Today, after efforts and after 5 hours of coordinating or attempting to coordinate with the Israeli side approved for the medical teams to enter the area and evacuate some of the victims under the rubble. But there are still some areas that are not they are not capable to reach, and the Israeli troops are banning them from entering the area. The Red Cross committees and other organizations like that also are not that helpful in the situation here. Today's UN school massacre, actually there was a coordination with the Red Cross Committee. They informed that they were gonna hit the school, so they gathered the Palestinians in the schoolyards and fields and promised them that they will get them vehicles and buses in order to transport them to another school, but the Israeli warplanes struck them while they were gathered anyway. So it basically means that humanitarian organization efforts and other international relief organization efforts are useless here in this situation, as the Israeli occupation force does not even consider them or even gives them any sort of confirmation to their or any respect to humanitarian laws and human rights laws here in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, and tell us more about the Breaking the Siege operation launched by the Al-Qassam brigades. How successful has that been?
Well, Al-Qassam brigades and the Palestinian resistance groups, all united, have been fighting furiously against the Israeli troops across the borders, all across the borders actually. Al-Qassam brigades today announced that it had killed 8 Israeli soldiers in an operation when it bombed an Israeli tank or armored vehicle today at the eastern neighborhood of Hayy Tufah, eastern Gaza. Also, Saraya al-Quds, the military wing of Islamic Jihad movement, had announced that they had killed 4 Israeli soldiers in a similar operation eastern Shijaiya area on the eastern border of Gaza Strip. Al-Qassam also announced that they had launched an operation including firing dozens of rockets towards Israeli settlements and Israeli cities such as Tel Aviv and Haifa. The Israeli occupation forces confessed that these rockets had fell on their lands and injured some Israeli citizens, and they had carried out some other rocket firing towards the southern Israeli settlements as well. Saraya al-Quds as well had announced this night an operation called Breaking the Silence. This operation was basically formed of launching 115 rockets at once, Grad rockets and other kind of rockets toward southern Israeli settlements. These rockets had reached Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Nitovot, and other southern Israeli settlements. The Israeli side had confessed that 13 Israeli settlers have been injured, and a lot of
there seems to be
residential buildings have been damaged.
Planes around you. Is there Israeli drones hovering from where you are?
Yes, true. There are Israeli drones. As I'm standing here, it's actually right above me. The Israeli warplanes did not leave the skies of Gaza since the beginning of this offensive. So they basically did not leave the sky for 18 days now. And since the beginning of the ground invasions, the drones and the Israeli warplanes have intensified their roaming the skies and hovering over the skies. It seems like the Israeli warplanes sound is getting loud which means that it is coming closer and about to strike probably.
All right, Balsam, thank you for those updates, and please do stay safe. Well, as you heard there, 18 days of relentless Israeli bombardment has brought the death toll in Gaza to over 790, while more than 5,050 others have been injured. Thursday alone saw the ruthless Israeli onslaught claim the lives of at least 70 Palestinians, wounding dozens of others in attacks across the besieged enclave. Israeli warplanes have targeted densely populated residential areas, mosques and hospitals indiscriminately. In Khan Yunis, more than 7 people, 5 of whom are from the same family, were killed in a series of air raids and artillery fire. The area of Khoza, east of Khan Yunis, has been the scene of a recent Israeli-perpetrated massacre, as most of its victims remain trapped under the rubble. This as Palestinian resistance groups retaliate against the Israeli aggression by firing barrages of rockets into Israeli settlements while confronting troops on the ground. In the latest operation, dubbed Breaking the Siege, launched by Hamas's military wing Al-Quds brigades, the group fired over 115 rockets into Tel Aviv, Ashdod, Beersheba and Ashkelon. Palestinian factions again targeted Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport with M75 rockets. Meanwhile, clashes continued between Israeli occupation forces and resistance fighters in different parts of the Gaza Strip. Al-Qassam announced that its fighters killed 8 Israeli soldiers east of Al-Tufah and destroyed a military vehicle. Israeli security forces fired tear gas on thousands protesting Palestinians on the village of Belin near Ramallah as West Bank demonstrations grow bigger over the brutal Israeli offensive on the Gaza Strip. The protests, which erupted near Ramallah, evolved into a mass march towards the Qalandia crossing, where heavy clashes with occupation forces ensued. Recently, 2 Palestinians were shot dead and dozens injured during the solidarity marches over the last week in occupied West Bank. In addition, 4 Palestinians were detained Wednesday in Abu Dis near occupied Al-Quds during clashes with the Israeli forces. As millions around the world prepare to mark International Al-Quds Day on Friday, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, called for the arming of Palestinians in both Gaza and the West Bank. Hassan Dabash has more for us from Tehran.
Millions of people worldwide are expected to take to the streets to mark International Quds Day, including Iranians across the Islamic Republic. International Quds Day is a day of rallies in support of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause established by Iran 35 years ago. This year's ceremonies coincide with Israel's ongoing current aggression on the besieged Gaza Strip, which has so far killed hundreds of civilians. It also comes as the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, called for the arming of Palestinians not just in Gaza, but in the occupied West Bank.
Crimes committed in the Gaza Strip and beyond reflect the brutal nature of the Zionist entity, which has no cure, only the eradication and elimination of it. But until then, the only way to counter it is arming the Palestinians, including those in the occupied West Bank.
Iran's President Sheikh Hassan Rouhani recently called for a massive turnout in this year's International Quds Day to show support for the Palestinians. The spokesman for the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, or the IRGC, Ramazan Sharif, has said in a press conference that demonstrations will be held in nearly 800 locations across Iran.
770 locations have been designated across the Islamic Republic for the rallies on International Quds Day, which this year falls on Friday, July 25th. According to our sources, this year's International Quds Day will witness demonstrations in 80 countries around the world. Over 3,100 foreign and domestic reporters will cover the event in Iran alone.
Back in August 1979, the late founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Imam Ruhollah Khomeini, declared the last Friday of the holy Muslim month of Ramadan International Quds Day. Since then, Muslims around the world, including in the West, take to the streets to show support for the Palestinian people and call for an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands, including the Holy Al-Quds in the occupied West Bank. This street is one of many locations where massive rallies will be held on the occasion of International Quds Day tomorrow on Friday. The event witnesses the largest rallies of the year. Reporting for AEE TV, Hussein Dabash, Tehran.
You're watching Al World News, still to come. A change of the guard in Kiev. Ukraine's premier resigns following the disbanding of the ruling coalition.
How many children should be slaughtered? How many mothers should bury their children? How many stones can they throw against the ruthless army? Before we realize we have a duty, sacrifice a Friday for their sacrifices. Unite for Palestine and rise on Al-Quds Day.
Welcome back to AEE World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Israeli forces massacre 16 Palestinians in an attack on a UN-run school as the Gaza death toll spikes to over 790. Breaking the siege, Palestinian resistance groups launch hundreds of rockets against major Israeli cities. And Iraq's parliament elects Kurdish politician Fuad Massoum as the country's new president following months of political deadlock. Iraqi lawmakers elected veteran Kurdish politician Fuad Massoum as the country's new president. The move is likely to pave the way for the much-delayed formation of a new government. Wissam al-Bayati reports.
الأستاذ الدكتور فؤاد معصوم 211 السيد حسين الموسوي 17 وبذلك يكون السيد فؤاد معصوم رئيسا للجمهورية.
The Iraqi parliament has elected Iraq's new president. After 2 rounds of voting, Fuad Massoum, the only candidate from the Kurdish alliance for Iraq's presidency, after the withdrawal of the other 2 candidates, Barham Saleh and Najmuddin Karim, Massoum gained 211 votes.
I swear to God that I will maintain my lawful and constitutional duties with dedication and sincerity, and also to preserve the independency of Iraq and its sovereignty.
As soon as the Speaker of the Parliament revealed the winner for the presidency office, the lawmakers have called on the Iraqi National Alliance to choose the candidates for the premier office.
We call on you and the Parliament to assign the Iraqi National Alliance to form the new government, as we have only 15 days to form the government.
According to the Iraqi constitution, the Iraqi president should assign the biggest winning alliance or bloc in the parliament to choose the prime minister and form the government in 15 days. The Iraqi Federal Court has announced that so far it has not finalized its decision on whether the State of Law coalition is the biggest winning bloc to form the government, which raises many more questions about the complications of forming the new government. The three key posts have been the main obstacles among the disagreed politicians. Two of them have been settled, the presidency and the Speaker of the Parliament, but according to the political activists, the Premier office is the biggest issue in the political process in Iraq.
The presidency and the Speaker of the Parliament's posts has been settled according to the constitutional timelines, and whether the Prime Minister's post will take the same way remains to be seen. Usama al-Biati, Al-Ittijah, Baghdad.
Well, as Iraqi lawmakers elected a new president, the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon paid an official visit to the capital Baghdad as part of an international response to end the country's political paralysis and growing Islamist insurgency. Rehab Rakabi has the details.
United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon arrived Thursday, July 24th, to Iraqi capital Baghdad in an official visit. The visit comes as a part of an international response to Iraq's insecurity and humanitarian crisis caused by the militants' territorial expansion in the north and west of the country. According to Iraqi Cabinet Office, Ban Ki-moon held detailed talks with the top Iraqi officials and politicians, including Iraq's outgoing Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and newly elected Parliament Speaker Salim al-Jubouri. The talks were based on the latest political and security developments in the country, primarily the militancy which poses threat to the country's unity and the region. At a joint press conference, Iraqi outgoing Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki welcomed the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and stressed the importance of conducting such a visit by the UN officials to Iraq, especially at this crucial time when the country is facing the cruelest wave of terrorism. Al-Maliki asserted that Iraq's battle against the militant groups is not motivated by sectarian or ethnic backgrounds.
We told UN Secretary General that Iraq's war against the growing terrorism in Iraq is not ethnic or sectarian, and the rising number of volunteers from all over the country is based on defending Iraq.
For his part, the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon voiced deep concern of the growing violence in the country and the rising number of civilian death toll and the displaced people. He further vowed support for Iraqi people, calling on Iraqi politicians to unite their front to form an inclusive government and put an immediate measures to end the violence.
I vow my full support to the Iraqi government and people. Iraq is facing an existential threat, but it can be overcome by the formation of a thoroughly inclusive government, and it must be a government in which all Iraqis feel represented.
According to UN, more than 1.2 million people have been internally displaced, and at least 5,576 Iraqi civilians have been killed this year in violence, including some 3,500 since the militant offensive on Mosul June 10th. And political observers argue that the political unity is the mere remedy to overcome this existential threat posed by the extremist militants.
A united political front is considered today to be a protective shield for Iraqi people and political process in the face of the militants' advance and their allies in the region.
According to Iraqi officials, Ban Ki-moon is expected to visit Erbil to hold talks with Kurdistan President Masoud Barzani and its Prime Minister Nijirvan Barzani about the refugees' conditions in the region, and to urge the Kurds to join hands with the central government in Baghdad to tackle the ongoing crisis. Rehab Rakabi, Al-Ittijah, Baghdad.
The spokesman for the Iraqi Dawa Party in the UK, Zohair Al-Nahar, joins us now for more on the situation in Iraq. Dr. Nahar, as a moderate, will Fuad Ma'soom be able to act as a mediator between Iraq's different factions, especially during this very critical time?
Yes, I believe that Fuad Ma'soom is a seasoned politician. He is a very close ally to Jalal Talabani, the former president, and he is one of the leaders of the Kurdish people. He is able, I think, to be able to mediate. He has a very moderate stance. He is very versed in the legal and the constitutional laws, and is a great supporter for the unity of Iraq and the moving of Iraq forward to forming a new government.
But is the appointment of this president really a sign that the political paralysis is ending and the country is close to forming a cabinet?
Well, I mean, the parliament has made good progress so far in choosing the head of the parliament and now choosing the head of the country, essentially the presidency. The next role will be the most challenging role, which is the role of selecting the prime minister. And I believe that is something that we are edging towards a resolution on that front.
Given the political opposition, does Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki still have the chance to secure a third term?
Prime Minister Maliki is one of the candidates. Prime Minister Maliki is, of course, under intense pressure to step down from many sides, from many areas. It remains to be seen whether he can withstand that pressure. You know, the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani to many Iraqis is clear that Iraq needs a prime minister that is able to bring together all sectors of the Iraqi society, and that many believe excludes Prime Minister Maliki. So there is a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Maliki to step down, and it remains to be seen what the United Alliance, the Shia groups, decide as a final candidate.
The Kurds seem to have one foot in Iraq and the other out. What is it they are really aiming to achieve here?
The Kurds, of course, have exploited the situation in Iraq in that they have always aspired to have independence, and the current situation in Iraq has encouraged them to seek towards that. However, I believe that with the presidency of Fuad Ma'soom, that the Kurdish stance will become more moderate and more inclusive, committing more to a united Iraq.
We know that the Peshmerga forces are caught in fighting with the Islamic State militants. Do you think that the Kurdish regions, however, will stay clear of this insurgency?
Well, the military situation on the ground threatens all sectors of Iraq, the Kurds, the Shias, and the moderate Sunnis. So I believe that the Kurds realize the danger and realize that their interest lies within a united Iraq, and there is a lot of coordination between central government, the central army, and the Peshmerga in fighting the ISIS terrorists.
All right, Dr. Zohair Nahar, spokesman for the Dawa party in the UK. Thank you for speaking to Ali Tija. Staying in Iraq, where at least 15 people have been killed in central Baghdad following two massive car explosions which targeted the Karrada district. The blasts went off consecutively, also injuring at least 25 people. The area where the explosion struck is also densely populated and sustained extensive material damage. Earlier, at least 60 people were killed after suicide bombers and gunmen attacked a bus transferring convicts charged with terrorism from a prison north of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. According to local security officials, 50 prisoners were among the dead, many of them burnt beyond recognition. A number of policemen also died during the assault. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Let's get the latest on that violence, and for that we can cross over to Mustafa Al-Qattan. Mustafa, what is the latest that you are hearing about that bombing in the capital today?
Yes, actually, today at 7 o'clock, a car exploded in El Karada district in the center of Baghdad, and in a quick succession, another car exploded at the same area after 5 minutes. The double attack actually resulted with more than 12 people dead and another 43 killed. The Iraqi security forces cordoned the attack team and start to evacuate the wounded and the dead bodies. The Iraqi army today and the Iraqi security forces actually launching a counter attack to search and to catch the attackers and who implemented these attacks in the center of Baghdad. Also, at dawn today, militants attacked a convoy which was transferring as.
All right, Mustafa, unfortunately we are going to have to leave it there. We do apologize to our viewers for the poor quality of the line. Well, militants belonging to the so-called Islamic State have ordered that all women between the ages of 11 and 46 must undergo female genital mutilation in the areas of Iraq under their control. The announcement is only the latest in a string of terrifying policies being enforced by the extremist group, which could affect up to 4 million women and girls across northern Iraq.
As if the Christian exodus from the northern Iraqi city of Mosul was not enough to prove the barbaric nature of IS-led militants, the extremist fighters have unleashed more disturbing policies. UN official Jacqueline Badcock said the new fatwa or religious edict is something very new for Iraq and will have dramatic consequences on the whole of the community in Mosul. Female genital mutilation, or FGM, poses many health risks to women, including infections, infertility, and increased risk of newborn deaths at childbirth. All this is part of the IS militants' campaign of terror across northern Iraq. The group has continued its systematic targeting of holy shrines across the city of Mosul, detonating the revered shrine of the Prophet Jonah. Earlier, militants from the Islamic State forced Christians in Mosul out of the city and dubbed their houses with the Arabic letter N to mark them out as Christians, apparently confiscating their properties. IS-led militants overran Mosul last month and swiftly took control of much of the rest of Nineveh, as well as parts of 4 other provinces north and west of Baghdad, in an offensive that has displaced hundreds of thousands of civilians.
An Algerian aviation official has confirmed that the missing Air Algerian flight en route from Burkina Faso to Algiers has crashed. Air Algeria lost contact with one of its passenger planes shortly after it took off. The missing aircraft had around 116 people of various nationalities on board, including 51 French, 20 Lebanese and 7 Algerians. Its 6-member crew were all Spanish. Fresh clashes have erupted between Ansar al-Sharia militants and the Libyan army in the eastern city of Benghazi, leaving 9 people dead and 19 others injured. Grad rockets and anti-craft cannons were used in the fighting, which has now shifted into residential areas. The clashes coincided with calls to send further reinforcements to the army as paramilitary forces continue to battle Islamist militias in the city. Battles have intensified in the capital Tripoli and Benghazi since the announcement of parliamentary elections results on Monday. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk announced his resignation after two parties pulled out of the country's governing coalition. The Udara and Svoboda parties announced that they were leaving the government and seeking a snap parliamentary ballot. Under the constitution, the former Soviet Republic has 30 days to form a new coalition, or it must call early elections. The existing cabinet will remain in place in the meantime. For his part, Yatsenyuk said he was resigning in protest over the collapse of the coalition.
Under the present circumstances, what options are there providing? We are a parliament presidential republic. First option, when one coalition splits, the prime minister has to start the procedure of forming a new one. What does this mean? It means that the prime minister will be guilty of bringing into a coalition communists and members of the party of the regions. It is unacceptable for me. There is another option. In the absence of a new coalition, and the current coalition has split, the government and the prime minister have to tender their resignations. I'm announcing my resignation because of the split of the coalition and blocking of government initiatives.
As the investigation into the downing of the Malaysian airliner picks up steam, Russia seems to be the only country providing any real clues as to what may have happened to MH17. And even though Western governments have been implicating Moscow, they have so far failed to back their claims with any real proof.
Moscow has been facing a bulk of U.S. accusations that it was somehow involved in the downing of a Malaysian plane near the Ukraine-Russia border over a week ago. But now the Russians are fighting back.
It was declared that the data collected by U.S. technical intelligence and the satellite photographs proved that the rocket was launched from the territory controlled by the rebels. Where is this data? Why is it not presented to the public? Are they, so to say, still making it?
In his speech, Antonov also wondered how the size of accusations thrown at Moscow could possibly be based on unverified material taken from social media.
U.S. intelligence officials refer to some photos posted on social networks which allegedly show a missile launcher crossing the border between Russia and Ukraine. What exactly are they talking about? Are they talking about a picture of Ukrainian book being transported somewhere by Ukrainians on a prime mover with a white cab made in the town of Krasnoarmeysk, which has long been controlled by the Ukrainian military? Or maybe they're talking about a photograph of book number 312. If so, there is another picture of the same launcher rolling as part of a Ukrainian armor column. Gentlemen, are you implying that this is the launcher that fired the missile? If so, demand an explanation from Kiev.
For his part, the country's ambassador to Malaysia said Russia will cooperate with the investigation into the downing of the Malaysian airliner. The diplomat also rejected suggestions that the pro-Russian separatists possessed a Russian-made anti-aircraft missile, adding that the rebels lacked the training to use such a system. Following the plane crash, the Russian Defense Ministry released monitoring data related to the accident. Based on this information, the ministry raised a number of questions for Kiev and other Western governments, which are blaming Russia for the disaster. The questions, however, have remained unanswered.
Yemeni world traveller Ahmed Al-Qasmi has crossed 41,000 kilometers on the back of a camel as he attempts to set a new world record. Ahmed, who recently travelled to the Middle East and Africa, has set his sights on Australia, South America and Europe, where he is seeking to spread a message of peace as opposed to the clash of civilizations. Our Sana'a correspondent Mohammed Al-Attab has more on this fascinating story.
Ahmed Al-Qasmi is aiming high. Yemen's well-known world traveler has so far crossed 41,000 kilometers on the back of a camel as he is looking to set a new world record. Ahmed developed a love for travel after Yemen's south and north were united, a historical event he honored by crossing the whole country from Sana'a to Oman on foot.
The idea of traveling started in 1992, which was simple and started from Sana'a to Muscat on foot. Such a trip showed me the secrets and advantages of long journeys.
Ahmed believes that the world's boundaries shouldn't exist in the first place because he says humans are meant to live together in peace and harmony. This is why he decided to ride a camel and spread this idea to the world. Ahmed has recently traveled to the Middle East and Africa on the back of a camel in a hope that these man-made borders would be erased.
I crossed 41,000 kilometers, but not in one interval. Such distance was separated in different stages, and for example, I traveled for a year and 9 to 10 months and rest for 1 to 2 years to plan for the next destination.
Nowadays, fast transportation means the choice of almost everyone. International traveler Ahmad Al-Qasimi has taken the traditional alternative as a means for journeying throughout the world. He says lightheartedly that it may not be fast in crossing distances, but it sure is fast in gaining people's affection.
Camels for sure are traditional means which were used throughout history. For sure, I am proud that I am riding a camel and going from an international capital to another at a time when speed and airplanes are people's first choice.
Ahmed's next destinations are Australia, South America and Europe, where he is seeking to spread a message of peace as opposed to the clash of civilizations.
For sure, my travel by camels is rare and unique, especially as it carries a humanitarian message, which is a message of love, peace and tolerance, in particularly during these exceptional times.
Ahmed is absent from home for a period of at least 9 months at a time, which only adds to the amount of respect and admiration he receives for his travels.
I was rewarded as the first Arab and international traveler on the back of a camel in 2012. Such a prize has encouraged me to continue realizing my dream, as I am currently planning to make a journey in Australia, which will start in 2015 from Darwin to Sydney.
Despite the challenges and dangers he faces during his voyages, Ahmed always finds ways to realize his dreams, but still hopes that one day he will find his ideas embraced by his home country. Through his travels, Ahmed gained great experience which has enabled him to become an author of travel literature and a living witness of the world's modern history. محمد العطاب الاتجاه TV, Sana'a.
Here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Israeli forces massacre 16 Palestinians in an attack on a UN-run school as the Gaza death toll spikes to over 790. Breaking the siege, Palestinian resistance groups launch hundreds of rockets against major Israeli cities. And Iraq's parliament elects Kurdish politician Fuad Ma'soum as the country's new president following months of political deadlock. Well, that's all from me and the Al News team. Thank you for watching and good night.